there's just this quiet whisper in your brain asking, okay, what's next?
Oh, absolutely. The dreaded what's next.
Exactly. And for years, modern psychology and frankly just our entire culture has told us to treat that restlessness like it's a disease.
Like it's a bug in the system.
Yeah, we treat it like an irritating failure of our own gratitude, right? Like, why can't I just be happy with what I have? We assumed that if we were truly healthy or truly enlightened or spiritually mature, we would just achieve this state of perfect static calm,
A plateau.
a plateau of peace where desire just ceases completely. But what if that entirely natural, undeniably human restlessness isn't a bug in the system at all? What if it's actually the defining feature of a perfectly healthy soul?
I mean, that reframe, that completely changes everything about how we view our inner lives.
It really does.
Because the underlying assumption of modern life is that the goal of the spiritual journey, or really any personal development journey, is to reach a finish line. You cross it, and then you just exist in this unchanging state of relaxation.
Like retiring on a spiritual beach somewhere.
Yes. But because we don't ever hit that, we pathologize our longing. We look at our inability to simply sit still and be perfectly satisfied with the material world, and we diagnose it as, a failure to be present.
Which brings us to the actual map for this deep dive. Because,
Hmm.
we aren't looking at a contemporary self-help manual to solve this problem today.
No, we are going way back.
Way back
Yeah.
to the 4th century. We're diving into a text called The Life of Moses, and it was written by Gregory of Nyssa. And just to set the table for you listening, Gregory was one of the Cappadocian fathers, just this towering intellect, a mystic, and a bishop in the early Christian church.
A brilliant mind.
Truly. And the specific translation we're working from today is by Abraham J. Malherbe and Everett Ferguson. Plus, it features this really vital preface by John Meyendorff that we're going to lean on pretty heavily throughout this conversation.
Yeah, we definitely are. And to approach this text properly, we kind of have to understand the frequency that Gregory is operating on. Because if you hear the title, The Life of Moses, your mind probably immediately goes to the historical Exodus.
Right, the Charlton Heston movie.
Exactly. You picture the plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, wandering in the desert. You expect an academic history lesson or like an archaeological review of the Bronze Age.
Yeah, documentary.
But Gregory employs this method of reading the scriptures that was very common in the ancient Alexandrian tradition. He reads the text twofold. So first, there is the Historia.
The actual literal history.
Right, the literal historical sequence of events. And he acknowledges that these things happened. But the actual treasure, like the real substance of his work, is the Theoria.
And Theoria translates roughly to spiritual contemplation, or sort of an allegorical meaning.
Yes.
So he's taking the historical narrative and treating it as a psychological and spiritual blueprint. He's essentially saying that the story of Moses is your story. The geography of the Exodus isn't external, it's an inward map.
An inward map of the soul's deeply personal journey.
Right, a journey of liberation, purification, and what the Eastern tradition calls theosis.
Which is such a massive concept.
It is the endless ascent into union with the divine. And that concept of an endless ascent is really where we need to start.
It's a foundation.
Yeah, because it is the foundation of everything Gregory argues. So to grasp why Gregory's framework is so revolutionary, we have to look at the intellectual water he was swimming in.
And John Meyendorff points this out brilliantly in the preface.
He does.
Because Gregory was a Greek thinker, right? He
Yeah.
was educated deeply in classical Greek philosophy, Platonism, Neoplatonism. And in the classical Greek mind, the concept of perfection was fundamentally tied to boundaries.
To limit.
Exactly. It was tied to limits.
And I mean, that makes intuitive sense even today, right? If something is perfect, it implies completion. Like if a circle is perfect, it's because the line forming its boundary has no flaws, no deviations.
Right. It contains a specific finite area perfectly.
Exactly. If it didn't have a boundary, it wouldn't be a shape at all.
And the Greeks took that geometric intuition and applied it to reality itself. For a Greek philosopher, the concept of the infinite, which they call the operon, was essentially synonymous with chaos.
Oh, interesting. So infinite was bad.
It was formless, unbounded, and therefore inherently imperfect. To be infinite meant to lack definition. So the Greek philosophical mindset concluded that God, or the ultimate good, or the ideal form of anything, must be static and immutable.
Because if God is already perfect, God cannot change.
Right. God cannot move, cannot grow, and certainly cannot be infinite in the sense of being unbounded. For the Greeks, God must be the ultimate, perfectly bounded, static reality.
Which, and this is wild, creates a terrifying logical consequence for human
It
beings.
really does.
Because if the ultimate goal of the human soul is to become like God or to reach perfection, then we would also have to become static. Like we would have to reach our own designated boundary, fill up our little cup of perfection completely, and then just, what, freeze there for
Pretty
eternity.
much. Just freeze. And this is the precise moment where Gregory of Nyssa violently fractures the Greek mold. Meyendorff argues that Gregory transcends the Greek mind itself on this specific issue.
How so?
Well, Gregory asserts something that was philosophically scandalous at the time. He says God is infinite, full stop. God's goodness, his beauty, his love, they have no boundaries whatsoever.
So no perfect circles.
No circle. The divine nature is an inexhaustible ocean. And if that is true, then the human soul's calling to participate in God, to experience theosis, cannot be a journey toward a static finish line.
It can't be.
The soul's journey toward an infinite God must, by definition, be infinite.
Okay, I actually have to stop here and push back on this a little bit because philosophically, maybe that sounds grand, but practically,
You're worried it sounds exhausting.
extremely.
Yeah.
If you tell me the journey never ever ends, that sounds like a nightmare. I'm picturing this spiritual treadmill where some unseen force keeps jacking up the incline, and you never ever get to press the stop button.
Right.
You never get to wipe your face with a towel and say, I made it. If you never reach the destination, aren't you just perpetually failing to arrive?
That's such a natural reaction.
Yeah.
But you are interpreting infinite movement through the lens of earthly labor.
Aye, fair.
Think about it. In the physical world, movement implies a lack of something. You move toward the fridge because you lack food.
Right.
You move toward a goal because you lack the status or the security it brings. You're constantly struggling against the friction of reality to acquire something you don't have. And when you finally get it, what happens?
Well, you enjoy it for about 10 minutes, and then you get used to it. The thrill is totally gone.
you get bored.
Yeah, you get bored.
That is the cycle of earthly desire. It's frustration from lacking the thing, followed by satiety, this kind of bloated boredom from finally having it. We assume that a relationship with the divine has to follow that exact same cycle, just on a grander scale.
But Gregory says no.
Gregory argues that meeting God does not result in either frustration or satiety. Because God is infinite love and infinite goodness, participating in him isn't like acquiring an object. It is entering into a relationship of endless discovery.
So the actual mechanism of desire changes. It's not that you're striving for something you lack, it's that the thing you are receiving is so vast, it continually reshapes you.
That is the crucial mechanism. The soul's capacity is actually expanded by what it receives. Imagine pouring an ocean into a vessel, but the vessel is miraculously made of a material that expands the more water it holds.
Oh, I love that image.
Every time you think you have reached the absolute summit of knowing God, every time you think you are completely full, the very presence of God stretches your soul. You suddenly realize you have a new, larger capacity for him, and there's an entirely new, infinitely vast mountain range of beauty right ahead of you.
Bringing this back to the very beginning of our conversation, this completely recontextualizes the modern midlife crisis.
Oh, absolutely it does.
Because a classic midlife crisis happens when you actually manage to reach the earthly boundaries you set for yourself.
Yeah.
You get the career, you get the family, the financial security, you fill up your bounded circle.
You check all the boxes?
You check them all, and you look around and realize, wait, this didn't fix me? This didn't satisfy the infinite longing inside me? And usually people despair at that point. They literally burn their lives down.
They buy the sports car, quit the job.
Right. But Gregory is standing there in the 4th century saying, well, of course it didn't satisfy you. You were trying to feed an infinite appetite with finite mud.
Yes. The infinite longing isn't a glitch.
Right. It's the core feature of the human soul. It's the proof of your divine design.
And that restlessness is the diagnostic tool that proves you were made for the infinite. So good.
However, and this is a big, however, acknowledging that you have an infinite destiny is only the prologue.
The warm-up.
Exactly. Gregory notes in The Life of Moses that before the soul can begin this endless, beautiful ascent toward the divine, it has to take a hard, brutal look at its current reality.
It has to wake up.
It cannot begin the journey until it wakes up to the reality of its own slavery. It has to wake up in Egypt.
And in Gregory's theory, His spiritual allegory, Egypt, isn't a literal geographic location.
No, not at all.
It represents the material, earthly realm when it is completely divorced from God. It's a state of psychological and spiritual existence.
More specifically, it is a state of total slavery to the passions. And we really need to clarify what the ancient writers mean by that word.
Yeah, because today passion is a positive thing.
Right, today we use passion to mean enthusiasm or romantic love, like find your passion. But in this ascetic framework, a passion is an appetite that is mutated into a compulsion.
It's an unhealthy, obsessive desire. Hunger mutates into gluttony. The desire for security mutates into hoarding and greed.
The appreciation of beauty mutates into lust.
Precisely. When the soul is in Egypt, it is entirely passive. It is constantly being yanked around by these internal compulsions and external stimuli. And the architect of all this misery, the ruler of this state, is Pharaoh.
So in this inward reading, Pharaoh is the ultimate tyrant. He represents the human ego, the power of sin, those dark obsessive forces that demand constant, grinding labor, but yield absolutely no lasting reward.
Notice the specific nature of the labor Pharaoh demands, too. In the historical narrative, the tyrant forces the Israelites to make bricks.
Right.
Gregory asks, what are bricks made of?
Earth and water.
Mud. The Israelites are forced to endlessly labor in the mud, baking clay in the sun, just to build monuments for a tyrant who hates them.
That is so bleak.
But Gregory views this as the perfect, devastating metaphor for a soul consumed by earthly, material anxieties. You are obsessing over wealth, status, physical gratification, your reputation. You are working yourself to death to build structures out of mud that will ultimately crumble.
All to satisfy an ego that will never, ever say, that is enough.
Never.
If we're looking for a modern equivalent for this, the attention economy and our digital addictions just map onto this perfectly.
Oh, it's uncanny.
Think about what we do every single day.
Mm.
We willingly hand over our time, our emotional energy, our deepest reserves of focus. We are making bricks.
Literally staring at little glass rectangles.
Right, we're building massive, profitable monuments for a tyrant. These algorithms, this relentless consumerism, these engineered social anxieties. And what does the tyrant give us in return?
Exhaustion.
Burnout, a fractured attention span, a profound sense of isolation. We are literally slaves in Egypt, doom scrolling at 2 a.m., making digital bricks without straw.
And we are whipped while we do it.
Yeah.
Gregory identifies the Egyptian taskmasters as the daily anxieties, the intrusive thoughts, and the fears that keep the soul constantly agitated.
Whipped by the fear of missing out.
Whipped by the fear of failure. Whipped by the desperate need for external approval, the taskmasters keep our heads forced down into the mud so that we are too busy and too terrified to ever look up and realize there is a divine reality above us.
So how does the breakout happen? Because just recognizing you are a slave doesn't automatically set you free.
Right. Knowing you're addicted to your phone doesn't stop you from reaching for it the moment you wake up.
Exactly. So where does Moses come into this psychological reading?
Gregory looks at the very origin of Moses to explain this escape mechanism. Moses is placed in a basket as an infant and drawn from the water. In ancient literature, and particularly in Gregory's framework, water is a consistent symbol for the chaotic, fluctuating, unstable waves of earthly passions.
So he's pulled out of the chaos.
The soul represented by Moses must be pulled out of this drowning chaos.
It's the moment of self-awareness. It's the moment you realize you are actually drowning in your own life.
Yes, it is the birth of the spiritual conscience. But then, if you remember the story, Moses is raised in the Egyptian courts. He receives Egyptian wisdom.
Right. He grows up as a prince.
And Gregory interprets this as the soul being educated in the ways of the world, learning the false, idolatrous, superficial dogmas that society prizes. But eventually, a conflict arises.
He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew.
Exactly, and he strikes the Egyptian down. Allegorically, the Egyptian represents those false philosophies and destructive mindsets of the world. The Hebrew represents the true, nascent spiritual intuition within us.
So there comes a breaking point where the soul just has to violently reject the mindset that is beating down its true spiritual nature. You have to intellectually turn against the tyrant.
But as you pointed out earlier, intellectual rejection isn't enough to actually cross the border out of Egypt.
No, it never is.
The soul needs a catalyst. It needs a revelation from entirely outside the system of slavery to initiate the real escape. The soul has to be confronted by a reality greater than the mud.
And that brings us to the wilderness of Midian and the encounter at the burning bush.
The pivotal moment.
Moses has fled Egypt. He's tending flocks in the quiet of the wilderness. and he sees a bush that is on fire but is not being consumed by the flames. Gregory reads this as the soul's first authentic encounter with divine mystery.
It is the initial illumination. The light of God appears, but crucially, it does not destroy the physical reality it inhabits.
Meaning the bush doesn't turn to ash.
Right. And the ancient church fathers, Gregory included, tie this directly to the mystery of the incarnation of Christ, and specifically to the virginity of Mary.
Oh, how so?
The idea is the divine fire entering human reality without destroying its integrity. It is the paradox of the infinite willingly interacting with the finite.
But the psychological pivot point here, the thing that actually catalyzes the soul's transformation, is the command God gives to Moses.
Remove the sandals.
Yes. The voice in the bush says, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." I really want to linger on this because Gregory's interpretation of the sandals is, to me, one of the most profound aha moments in the entire text.
It's brilliant. Gregory asks us to literally consider what sandals are actually made of.
Leather.
All right, they are made from the skin of dead animals. For Gregory, this dead skin is a profound symbol. It represents the garments of mortality, it represents our fleshly attachments, and crucially, it represents the artificial earthly identities we wrap ourselves in just to navigate the mud of Egypt.
It is the armor we wear, and the command to take it off is completely counterintuitive to how we operate in the world.
Completely.
Normally, if you were summoned to meet someone of immense power, like a king or a CEO, or even if you were just going on a first date, what's the instinct?
You dress up.
You dress up, you put on your best layers, you highlight your achievements, you project your most competent self. But when the soul meets God, the command is the exact opposite. Strip down, take off the defenses.
Because you cannot perceive spiritual truth while you are heavily armored in earthly defenses. The dead skin acts as an insulator. It actually prevents the bare soul from touching the holy ground of reality.
It's a barrier.
It is a demand for absolute, terrifying vulnerability.
Think about the modern dead skins we wear today. Like, corporate jargon is a dead skin.
Oh, absolutely.
Performative parenting on social media is a dead skin. Intellectual arrogance, like the need to always have the smartest take on a given topic, is a deeply layered dead skin. We curate these personas, these artificial avatars, so that we can walk over the messiness of life without feeling the pain of it.
We protect our feet from the rocks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We introduce ourselves by our titles. I am a VP of marketing, or I am a successful entrepreneur.
But God is basically saying, I cannot connect with the VP of marketing. I cannot commune with the curated avatar. Those things do not actually exist. They are constructs. I can only commune with the naked, vulnerable soul.
Which means the first step of true illumination is a profound stripping away of illusions. We talk about purity of heart as if it just means, not having bad thoughts.
Right, just being nice.
Yeah, being a nice person. But in Gregory's theology, purity of heart is the removal of the dead skin. It's the soul recognizing that its intellect, its worldly achievements, its bank account, its ego, none of these can comprehend or impress the divine. You have to stand barefoot in the dirt.
And only when the soul is stripped of its armor and empowered by the illuminating light of this truth is it ready to return to Egypt, confront the tyrant, and finally lead the exodus out of slavery.
But stripping off the dead skin of the bush creates a new, immediate problem.
You are now exposed.
You're exposed. And when Pharaoh realizes you are actually trying to leave, it panics. It doesn't just let you walk out of the country peacefully, it doubles down. The tyrant chases you.
Which is exactly what happens when the soul hits the water. We arrive at the Red Sea.
The crossing of the Red Sea is easily one of the most dramatic, visually arresting moments in the historical narrative. The Israelites reach this impassable sea, the waters part, they cross on dry land, and then the waters violently collapse and drown the pursuing Egyptian army.
And Gregory insists that we must interpret this violent imagery entirely inward.
Because if we just read it literally, it's a story about divine warfare and destroying a human army.
Right. But inwardly, those soldiers on the chariots aren't external enemies at all.
What are they?
They are our own persistent sins. They are our greeds, our lusts, our resentments, our ego-driven desires.
The things chasing us.
Exactly. They are the deeply ingrained neural pathways of our worst habits that chase us down the literal moment we try to change our lives. They are the psychological tyrants that scream at us to return to the familiar comfort of slavery.
So they hit the water. Now, historically and mythologically, water in ancient texts almost always represents chaos or dissolution or death, right? Is Gregory leaning into that same terror here? Like, why does the mechanism of salvation have to be a terrifying sea.
Well, yes, the water is the mechanism of death, but Gregory views it through a deeply sacramental lens. He explicitly identifies the crossing of the Red Sea as the mystery of baptism.
Okay.
The water separates the old life of slavery from the new life of freedom. The old self goes into the water and dies. The new self emerges on the other side.
But let's unpack the daily psychological mechanism of that, because baptism isn't just a one-time ritual in this framework. It is an ongoing, lived reality.
It is the continuous daily choice to let old habits drown. The soul really wants freedom, but it is deeply terrified of the mechanism of freedom. It is terrified of the water. To let go of a coping mechanism, even a highly toxic one, feels like a kind of death.
It totally does. I think anyone who has ever tried to break a serious addiction or leave an abusive relationship or even just stop a chronic anxiety spiral knows the exact feeling of standing on that shore.
You can hear the chariots coming.
You feel the physiological urge to relapse. You know returning to Egypt will kill you slowly, but you look forward, and all you see is this raging sea of the unknown. You don't yet see the way forward. The panic of the Israelites is the literal panic of a mind right before a major psychological breakthrough.
It is the absolute crux of the spiritual struggle. But Gregory points out something vital about the nature of the water here. The water is completely obedient to the divine will.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. For the soul that is following the pillar of cloud and fire, following the guidance of the Spirit, the water becomes a wall of protection on the right and the left. The very thing that seemed like an impassable obstacle, the very chaos you feel would destroy you, actually becomes the instrument of your salvation. It drowns the things that are trying to kill you.
The psychological implication here is all about the nature of interior freedom. Because true freedom isn't just physically leaving Egypt. You can leave a toxic job, but if you carry the stress and the defense mechanisms of that job into your next role, you're still in Egypt. You're just commuting from a different zip code.
You brought the taskmasters with you.
Exactly. True freedom is standing on the far shore and watching the power that Egypt had over you be completely neutralized.
You literally watch the passions that once ruled you, like tyrants, wash up dead on the shore. They have lost their breath. They have no more authority over your mind.
You would think the story just ends there. Cue the triumphant music, roll the credits. You are free.
Happily ever after.
Right. But surviving the sea only lands the soul in one place. The desert. The wilderness.
And this is where the romanticism of the spiritual journey collides head-on with stark reality. The initial excitement of liberation, that immense high of surviving the Red Sea, fades incredibly quickly into the daily, austere grind of purification.
This maps so perfectly onto real life. You go on a silent retreat or you start a new meditation practice where you have a massive breakthrough in therapy, and you feel invincible. The sea has parted. The enemy is drowned.
Everything is fixed.
But then 3 weeks later, you wake up on a random Tuesday morning and you are just staring at the sand. The high is gone. You have entered the dry period.
And Gregory analyzes this phase with profound psychological insight. The wilderness is the necessary stage of testing and profound purification. Think about what they left behind. In Egypt, the Israelites had the flesh pots.
The stew.
They had heavy, rich, earthly food. Yes, it was the food of slaves, and yes, they were beaten while they ate it, but it was intensely flavorful. It provided an immediate, heavy satisfaction to the earthly appetites.
Fast food.
Basically, yes. In the wilderness, the soul is deprived of all that. The earthly consolations, the quick dopamine hits are entirely stripped away.
And what are they given to survive on instead? Manna. Heavenly bread.
But here is the brilliant catch with the manna, which Gregory draws out. The manna represents spiritual food, it represents the grace of God, and ultimately it represents Christ himself. But to a soul whose palate has been completely ruined by the heavy garlic and onions of Egypt...
It tastes like nothing.
Exactly. The delicate spiritual taste of the manna initially seems entirely bland. The soul complains. It actually starts to crave the familiar distractions of its slavery.
It's the exact dynamic of a dopamine detox. Like if you are used to the constant hyperstimulation of a smartphone, the bright colors, the endless novelty, the instant gratification, and then you force yourself to sit in silence to read a physical book or to pray, your brain basically goes into withdrawal.
It rebels.
It screams, "This is boring. Where are the bright lights? Give me the flesh pots." You actually crave the chains of Egypt because the taste of freedom is too subtle for your damaged palate to appreciate.
That is the tragedy of the unpurified soul. And it leads directly into the episode of the bitter waters at Mara.
Right, the oasis they find.
The Israelites are wandering in the desert, they are dying of thirst, and they finally find a pool of water. But when they try to drink it, it is incredibly bitter. The soul in the stage of purification often finds its reality deeply bitter.
It does.
The ascetic struggle, the discipline of prayer, the denial of the ego, the silence of the desert, it feels harsh, lonely, and frankly undrinkable.
So how does the soul survive this? Does God just magically teleport them to a better oasis with sweet water?
No. The solution is not to escape the bitterness, but to transform it.
Hmm.
Moses is instructed by God to take a specific piece of wood and throw it into the bitter water. When the wood touches the water becomes sweet and life-giving. And Gregory does not hesitate here. He explicitly identifies this wood as the mystery of the cross.
Okay, we need to dig into the mechanism of this. How does the concept of the cross sweeten the bitter water of our daily struggle and our dry periods?
The cross represents the ultimate paradox of the Christian faith. That life comes through death, that victory comes through total surrender, and that suffering can actually be redemptive.
So it changes the meaning of the struggle.
Exactly. When the soul introduces the reality of the cross, specifically the resurrection of Christ, into its own bitter struggles, the very nature of the struggle changes. The suffering isn't magically removed, but it is transformed. It's given profound meaning.
The soul realizes that its deprivation in the wilderness is not a random punishment.
Right. It is a participation in the purifying death of Christ, which is the necessary prerequisite for resurrection.
So it's the difference between meaningless pain and growing pains. Meaningless pain is just bitter, it just breeds resentment. But if you throw the wood into it, if you recognize that this dry period is actually carving out more space in your soul for God, that it is actively retraining your palate, it suddenly becomes sweet.
It does.
You realize you aren't just starving in the desert, you're being healed. You are learning the hardest lesson of all, that you cannot sustain yourself on mere willpower. Transformation requires grace.
The wilderness teaches the soul absolute dependence on that grace. And once the soul has endured this austere reality, once its palate is finally cleansed of the craving for Egypt, and it has learned to drink the sweetened waters of the Spirit, it is ready.
It's finally ready.
It is finally ready for the climax of the journey. It is ready to ascend the mountain of God, Sinai.
But the imagery of this ascent is incredibly intense and honestly a little intimidating. Moses leaves the people behind. He leaves the noise and the distractions at the bottom of the mountain. He climbs up, and he doesn't enter this bright, glowing, comfortable room of enlightenment. He enters a thick, dark cloud where God dwells.
This brings us to one of Gregory's most famous, most enduring, and honestly most deeply mystical concepts. The progression of spiritual perception.
Okay.
It is a progression that moves paradoxically from light into darkness.
But hold on. If darkness is the ultimate goal, that contradicts almost every other piece of spiritual and philosophical literature in human history.
It really does.
Like, light is always good. Light is knowledge, enlightenment, clarity, safety. Darkness is ignorance, fear, being lost. Why is Gregory flipping the script here? How is stepping into the dark a spiritual promotion?
It is a brilliant inversion because it deals with the limits of human capacity. Gregory explains that when the soul first begins its journey back at the burning bush, God is indeed known as light.
Okay.
That light scatters the darkness of our ignorance. It reveals the truth of our slavery and the reality of God's existence. It is the illuminating aha moment.
It gives you enough light to see the path out of Egypt.
Exactly. But as the soul draws closer to God, as it climbs the mountain of contemplation, it realizes that the initial light was just the absolute outermost edge of the divine reality.
Just a glimpse.
As you press into the essence of God, the human intellect begins to fail. The human mind is a finite instrument. It is designed to grasp finite concepts, to categorize, to bound things. But God is infinite. Therefore, the closer you get to the infinite, the less your finite mind can comprehend it.
It's like staring directly into the sun. It's not that the sun is dark. The sun is pure light. But the light is so overwhelmingly intense, so utterly beyond the capacity of the human eye to process, that it blinds you. Your optic nerve just shorts out.
It registers the overwhelming light as darkness because it exceeds your capacity.
That is wild.
That is the perfect analogy. Gregory calls this the luminous darkness, or the nophos. The darkness of Sinai is not the absence of God. It is the overwhelming, incomprehensible presence of God. To enter the cloud is to realize that God is infinitely greater than any concept, any image, any theological framework we have ever constructed about him.
Think about what this means for us today. We live in a culture that is utterly obsessed with mastering information. We want to life hack everything. We want a five-step framework for enlightenment. If we just listen to enough deep dives, read enough dense theology, or master enough ancient languages, we think we can fit God into a neat little intellectual box on our desk. We want to comprehend him. But Gregory is saying that the ultimate pinnacle of spiritual maturity is the complete surrender of the need to intellectually master God.
The intellect can only carry you so far up the mountain. It is a very useful tool, but eventually you reach a boundary where theology must give way to doxology, to worship and awe. You must step into the cloud. You must let go of your concepts of God in order to actually experience God.
That is incredibly challenging for the modern mind, but also deeply relieving. If we connect this back to the anxiety of the modern condition, that desperate, exhausting need to figure everything out, to have the perfect airtight worldview, the cloud invites us to just stop, to surrender, to simply be in the presence of mystery without needing to dissect it or categorize it, to realize that in the presence of the infinite, not knowing is actually a higher state of intimacy than knowing.
Not knowing is a higher state of intimacy. That bridges us perfectly into Gregory's defining theological contribution, which is the underlying thesis of this entire work. It is the concept of epektasis.
Epictesis, the endless stretching.
Yes. The term is based heavily on the Apostle Paul's words in his letter to the Philippians, where he talks about forgetting what lies behind and straining forward or stretching out to what lies ahead.
Right.
For Gregory, epektasis is the ultimate resolution to the problem we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive. Because God is infinite, and because we are finite creatures invited to participate in the infinite, spiritual perfection is not a static state of flawless rest. Perfection is the very act of continual progress.
So the journey truly is the destination, but not in a superficial bumper sticker cliche way, in a deep ontological way.
Gregory says that the soul moves from glory to glory. Every time the soul enters deeper into the divine mystery within the cloud, it is filled with God. It experiences profound joy and satisfaction. But the very act of being filled by the infinite God expands the soul's capacity. It literally stretches the vessel.
So by filling you, God actually creates a larger emptiness inside you. The satisfaction of the desire generates a greater desire.
Yes, a larger capacity for love, a larger capacity for awe, and because God is infinite goodness, he immediately fills that new, larger capacity, which stretches the soul even further, creating an even greater desire, which is immediately satisfied, and so on for all eternity.
So you never hit a wall.
The desire for God and the satisfaction of that desire are no longer at odds. They happen simultaneously and endlessly escalate. There is never a moment of boredom and never a moment of lack.
I want to bring this down to earth with an analogy because this concept is just mind-blowing. Think about a profoundly healthy, deep human relationship, like a 50-year marriage or a decades-long friendship. When you first meet someone, you get to know the basic facts about them. The light scatters your ignorance of who they are. But if you really love them, you don't reach year 10 of the marriage and say, well, I have perfectly comprehended my spouse. I know all their data. I am now in a state of static perfection regarding this relationship. I can stop paying attention and just rest.
If you adopt that mindset, the relationship immediately begins to die. It stagnates.
Exactly. You don't finish knowing a person you love. Because a human being is complex and constantly growing, every new depth you discover in your partner just opens up more mystery to explore. The joy of the relationship isn't in reaching a plateau where you know everything and nothing ever changes.
The joy is in the perpetual, endless discovery of the other person.
Yes, you are constantly stretching to know them more, and they're constantly revealing new depths to you.
That is a beautiful, earthly reflection of epektasis. And if a finite human being can provide decades of continuous, joyous discovery, how much more the infinite creator? For Gregory, there is no plateau in heaven or on earth. Virtue, grace, and love are dynamic, living realities. They are verbs, not nouns.
Right.
And Gregory emphasizes throughout the text that this entire theology invites continual movement toward Jesus Christ. Christ is the fulfillment of the ascent of Moses. He is the true manna in the wilderness. He is the rock that pours out water. He is the light in the burning bush. And he is the ultimate mystery hidden in the luminous darkness of Sinai. To follow him is to commit to an endless stretching into infinite love.
So let's bring this deep dive full circle and just retrace the map we've been given today. Because we said at the beginning, this isn't just ancient history. This is the architecture of our own inner lives.
We begin by waking up in the Egypt of our own distractions. We must recognize the tyranny of the passions, the sheer exhaustion of serving an ego that treats us like slaves, forcing us to make mud bricks of status and material anxiety.
Then we must seek the illumination of the burning bush. And crucially, we have to be willing to strip off the dead skin of our curated identities, our titles, our defenses. We have to approach the truth with radical, terrifying vulnerability.
From there, we face the crossing of the sea. We must trust that the waters of grace will part for us, but will absolutely drown our malice, our sins, and the psychological tyrants that chase us to the shore. We must watch our old habits lose their breath.
We survive that only to enter the wilderness, where we have to learn that we can't survive on the heavy, instant gratification junk food of Egypt anymore. We have to retrain our palate to eat the subtle spiritual manna, and we must allow the mystery of the cross to sweeten the bitter, dry periods of our transformation, turning meaningless pain into profound growth.
Until finally, purified and stripped of our need for intellectual control, we ascend the mountain. We leave the noise behind and we gladly surrender our pride to enter the divine, luminous darkness of Sinai.
And once we are in that cloud, we realize the journey has just begun, and it will never, ever end. Which brings us back to where we started, that feeling of restlessness,
The whisper.
that quiet whisper in your brain when you're sitting on the couch after achieving everything you thought you wanted, asking, what's next? I want to leave you with a deeply reflective idea built entirely on what Gregory of Nyssa has shown us today.
Please do.
What if the spiritual restlessness, that quiet dissatisfaction you feel with your life right now, isn't a symptom of a disease? What if it isn't a sign that you are failing, or that you're doing something wrong, or that you just need to try harder to be present? What if that restless ache is the very gravity of God, the divine epectasis pulling on your soul? What if you were built with a capacity for love that is exactly the shape of infinity, and the only way forward is not to try and plug that infinite void with the finite mud of Egypt, but to keep walking endlessly beautifully into the cloud?